everyone. I'm so happy to be here today, and thank you so much for joining us. First, we'd like to thank our sponsors, the Province of Alberta and the Government of Canada. Together, they provide employment support programs and services. I'd also like to thank Tribe, who is our technology provider and support, for doing all of the magic behind the scenes. We have a new platform now, so I'm kind of learning and everyone else, so hopefully everything today goes nice and smooth. And the fabulous talent pool team that made this event happen, we couldn't do it without them. So a few notices before we begin. Our next webinar is April 13th. Money Mentors is going to be back looking at future planning, retirement, career change, kind of the big picture of financial management. And so make sure you save the date and keep an eye on your emails for more information. June 8th is the next webinar after that, and it will be a panel discussion to answer your job search questions. I'm really interested in this because as a career coach, I'm always interested to hear firsthand from HR hiring managers to find out what's new, what are their expectations. So I hope you'll join us that day also. Now, coming up very soon is the job fair. And it's on March 23rd, and so registration is open. You can check out talentpooljobfair.com, and there's more information on that website and also in their social media posts in case you follow Twitter or LinkedIn. It's always a great place to go for information. Now, if you'd like to see me grow older, you can keep an eye out and check our past webinars over the last few years on the YouTube channel for Talent Pool. See, I'm all flustered because I know I'm growing older. Anyway, after this session, we will have a post-event survey. So we want you to keep your eye out on the link, and those who complete it will be entered to win an Amazon gift card. We all love Amazon, and there's always things that we can buy, I'm sure. Talent Pool has developed a very comprehensive list of mental health resources available to job seekers across the province. This list is a great resource for everyone. You can find it in the alerts, which is on your top right-hand part of the screen, and you will also be able to find it at talentpooljobfair.com resources. It's available for you to download. These are trying times still, and I think it's wonderful to have a list of support that is available to help us through this period. I want to share the process for today's events. As I mentioned, we are using a little different platform. And so for this presentation, we are going to have a short question break halfway through the presentation. And then we'll take a bit of time for you to think of questions, put them in the question and answer section. And our speaker will be happy to answer those for you. The question and answer is on your right-hand screen, so hopefully you'll be able to find that. We will also be asking you questions, and no, it's not a test, but we will be looking for answers for some of the questions, and you can also put that in that link of the question and answer. And so you won't be able to see how you've submitted, but we will be able to see what you've submitted, and we will share that. So let's get this show on the road. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today. Kara is from the Canadian Mental Health Association, so CMHA for short. She is a registered provisional psychologist with a master's degree in counseling psychology. She's worked as a counseling therapist since 2019. She's worked in the Calgary Grief and Loss Program, offering counseling to individuals, groups, and families. She follows the philosophy that everyone is the best author of their own life and sees her role as a counselor as supporting people along their journey, whether that's through grief, through loss, life adjustment, or any other difficult experiences that our clients may be living through. And I think we've probably all felt that throughout these last 2 years. I love looking through people's LinkedIn to learn more about them. And I noticed that Kara is a passionate volunteer, which always connects with me because I've been a professional volunteer, and I think that it really adds a dimension to your life. Her most interesting volunteer work for me is that she did work with PALS Pet Access League Society, where she took her therapy dog into long-term homes to bring joy to the residents. That's long-term care homes. So I'm not ready there yet, but I'm sure that having animals around really makes their day. So without further ado, Kara, I'm going to leave it up to you to start your presentation.
Okay, well, Lynn, thank you for such a wonderful introduction this morning. So I'll just, since I had such a wonderful introduction, I'm just going to get right into our presentation here. Just give me one moment here to bring it up. Bear with me with technology. It always takes me a minute.
We love to hate it.
Yeah, exactly. But isn't it wonderful that we can do this presentation online and have it access so many different people through the use of technology that we have here today? So like Lynn said, I work with the Canadian Mental Health Association in Calgary. We work in the areas of grief and loss. And we do work with one of our pillars, or one of our areas that we work in is with people who have lost employment. So with my experience, we've talked a lot. I've worked a lot in the area of some of the anxiety that happens over job loss, some of the anxiety that happens over grief and loss, and some of the anxiety that a job seeker can go through while looking for work. So really with this presentation, we're going to focus on managing the anxiety that comes along with looking for work. So like I said, today we're really gonna, because I'm a mental health professional, we're going to focus on anxiety. So we're going to start off the day just by looking at what anxiety is and what different kinds of anxieties the job seeker may have. We're going to look at how anxiety affects people from the past, their current job search, and really looking for jobs in the future. And then throughout the presentation, I'm going to share different techniques and different strategies and different areas of psychology that help people deal with stress and deal with anxiety. And then at the end of my presentation, one of my colleagues, Kirsten Sikorich, is going to come in and she's going to do some grounding techniques and teach some other techniques to manage anxiety for the last about 15-ish minutes of the presentation. So that's our plan for today. So I'd like to start out by doing a land acknowledgement. So in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we live, work, and play in the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina and the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations, more commonly known as the Stoney Nakoda Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their home in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. This land acknowledgement reminds us of the histories that precede us, highlights our responsibilities going forward, and helps bring us together in a shared journey of truth and reconciliation. So I wanted to start off today with also just a icebreaker activity. So I know that we have a poll that I wanted to start off with. So if everybody could just let me know how you're doing today on a scale of 1 to 5. So 1 being not good at all, 2 being I've had better days, 3 being feeling okay, 4 feeling great, 5 feeling amazing. So I'll just give everybody a minute to do the poll.
Well, I'm looking at the results and we have I have somebody who feels amazing. I'm thinking, wow, good. That's excellent. I must say it's morning. I'm not really amazing yet. I usually get amazing about mid-afternoon. Excellent. Okay. I'd say the majority are all feeling, pretty good. Pretty good.
Yeah, everybody's kind of in that 3-4 range.
Yeah.
All right, that's good. And I kind of agree with whoever said that, you know, amazing is kind of tough in the morning. Sometimes you do need to get a little closer to lunch to feel amazing, but I'm glad that everybody's kind of in the feeling okay, kind of a 3 or a 4 this morning. So the next thing I want to do, since we've kind of scaled how we're feeling today, and like I said, we're talking about anxiety, so we're going to be kind of focusing on how we're feeling and how we're doing today, is I just want to check in now that we've kind of put a number on how we're feeling, if we could put a word on how we're feeling. So I have this list here, this check-in list of how we're feeling. It has things like safe, tired, hurt, hopefully no one's bored yet this morning, nervous, anxious, grateful, calm, strong, neutral. So what I want everyone to do is just kind of think of what words are they drawn to this morning? What words here describe how you're feeling this morning? And if some people want to share in the message box any words that kind of resonate with them a little bit today, I'll give people just a minute or two to kind of type in any words that resonate with how they're feeling, or even if it's not on this list, to go ahead and add any other feeling words that they may resonate to this morning. And then you can let me know if anything comes up.
Excellent. And so you just put it in where it says Q&A. It says post a question. Just post your response. We've got neutral, glad, positive, and grateful. Grateful.
Well, that's wonderful. It looks like we're starting off on a good note this morning. Everybody's kind of feeling good, a 5, you know, a 3 or a 4, and we have a lot of good feeling words. So that's really good to know. So we should have a good presentation here this morning. So, you know, it's interesting to look at a list of words like that and kind of reflect on why maybe some words stand out for you a little bit more. Maybe if anybody was feeling anxious, maybe it was because, you know, there is some anxiety that comes with the job search. Or maybe if people were feeling, you know, positive, or, you know, I know that there was some grateful. Some people wrote down that they were feeling grateful. So maybe it's just a good opportunity to reflect on why you felt that way. And, you know, I just want to point out that especially during the jobs, when you're looking for a job and you're trying to stay resilient, it's important to remember that you can have both negative and positive feelings. So you can feel anxious, but also grateful. And you can feel, you know, maybe sad about something, but also, you know, feel respectful in other places of your life. So I just wanted to point out that, you know, because looking for a job can be such a mixed bag of emotions, that it's okay to feel that way as well. And it's okay to kind of hold that space to have those positive feelings and have those negative feelings at the same time, and just kind of know that they don't take from one another, and that it's just normal to have that experience when you're going through a job search of, you know, those highs and those lows and those positives and those negatives, and to just kind of normalize that and to let everybody know that that's okay. So now we're going to jump right into our presentation here and talk more about anxiety in the job seeker. So looking for work, you know, I don't think I have to tell anybody here. I don't think I have to explain this to anyone, but looking for work can bring up anxiety and different types of anxiety. Some of the anxiety that a job seeker may be going through, it could be caused from the loss of a previous job. So if somebody was you know, let go from a job unexpectedly, that can cause a lot of anxiety, because you're wondering what happened, you know, how could have things been different? So that, you know, the way that a previous job ended can really affect the anxiety that a job seeker is going through. There's also the anxiety over the change in status, over the change in financial security, and that sense of self, or that sense of purpose and meaning that people may have had from a previous job. So kind of dealing with that loss. There's also looking for work and not hearing back from companies. A lot of looking for a job and staying resilient is kind of being able to cope with that and manage that in a positive way, because unfortunately a lot of companies, you don't hear back when you apply for work for whatever reason. A lot of that's just kind of how it is. So another aspect of coping with this is learning different strategies, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on today, about how to cope with applying for work and just not hearing back. Another area of stress where that the job seeker can go through and have some anxiety around is not knowing what new opportunities will look like. So worrying about the future, worrying about what new jobs will look like or what will happen in new workplaces. And I just want to ask a question before we go on here is, how many of these situations can people here relate to? How many of these kind of anxiety provoking events or situations are people currently feeling or currently going through here today?
Someone has said 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Highly usual, not highly unusual.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So like I said, I just, it's very normal to be going through these things. Like somebody said, 100% highly usual, all of these things. It's very normal to be going through these things when you're looking for work. So we're going to talk about some strategies to better cope and better deal with some of these things. But before we get into that, I just want to help everybody identify exactly what anxiety is, and to know some of the kind of physical and physiological responses that we go through when we're experiencing anxiety. So anxiety is a mental and physical response to a threat. So it's very close and interrelated with fear. Anxiety is the anticipation of a threat. So that worrying about tomorrow, like I said, a lot of the times with the job seekers, it's what will tomorrow look like? What will new opportunities look like? So that creates a lot of anxiety, because you're worried about an anticipated threat that really what you're worrying about may or may not happen. And that's the frustrating part about anxiety, is that it's really almost that idea of borrowing problems from tomorrow. So, or borrowing worries from tomorrow, when you're just worried, it's that worry about what's going to happen next. It's an emotional response. And then when we go through anxiety, it's kind of that, that idea that I think everybody's probably heard about flight, fight, or freeze response. So this is something that's just evolutionary, developed in humans, and it's a way to protect us from danger. So when we go through anxiety, our bodies are kind of automatically will go through this fight response to get ready and put up a fight. Freeze, which means just kind of freeze and not do anything, or flight, which is take off and get away from the danger. So these are all kind of ideas behind anxiety. And I would say anxiety is a major concern when it becomes kind of all-consuming, I would say. And I know Lynn and her at the introduction, she said that there's a lot of different resources that they've shared with participants here today. So, I would say everybody has anxiety, right? We're all human. We all have lives. We all have families and other obligations that we're responsible for. So everybody has kind of a baseline of anxiety, right? So to sit there and say, well, I never experienced anxiety and this just isn't me, I mean, that's just not true. Everybody kind of has anxiety that they go through. When anxiety becomes a concern, when I would think anxiety becomes a concern is, like I said, when it goes from kind of that baseline anxiety to maybe more up here. So you're feeling anxious every day, you're feeling anxiety, and you're not really able, and I think this part here is really important, you're not really able to pinpoint why you're feeling anxious. You're just feeling anxious all the time. So there's a difference between I feel anxious because I have a job interview coming up this afternoon versus I feel anxious and I don't really know why, and I've just kind of felt this way for the past, month or two. That there's a big difference between those two. And I think the second one of I felt anxious for the last month or two and I don't really know why is when you know that anxiety is becoming more of a concern. Does anybody have any questions about that before I move on? And, I just want to repeat again that I know Lynn said that there's, for anybody who anxiety may be becoming more of a concern, Lynn said that there's some wonderful resources that they have to share as well too. Okay.
I think you've obviously covered it. There's no questions.
All right, so let's move on to symptoms of anxiety. So excessive worrying.
Sorry, may I interrupt? Because now there is a question.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
So the question is, does anxiety lead to depression?
Really good question. Yeah, absolutely. Anxiety, long-term anxiety, I believe, and there's a lot of thought in the mental health world that long-term anxiety absolutely does lead to depression, and even vice versa sometimes. Anxiety and depression, they really are very, very common, very, very common mental health, probably the two most common mental health concerns that people can go through. And yeah, absolutely. Long-term anxiety, long-term worrying, if we look at our list here of the symptoms of anxiety, like long-term worry, long-term nervousness, long-term avoidance, those are all the things that really can lead into depression. And then there's kind of like this snowball effect, because you have anxiety, you have all these things happening. And then if you look at the bottom bullet point here, daily functioning is disrupted. So people's sleep, exercise, and diet are disrupted. So all these things that when we're doing help us cope with anxiety and depression, we're not really able to do them as much. So that's kind of where I would say that snowball effect comes into place, because the things that can, you experience anxiety, which can turn into depression. And then the things that help us, cope with and manage depression, like the sleep, exercise, and diet, we're not making a priority anymore because of the anxiety and the depression. So yeah, absolutely. I don't mean to paint a really negative picture here, but that sometimes is how these things develop. And that is sometimes how anxiety and depression progress from being, more of a mild form to being more of a moderate to severe form of anxiety and depression. But like I said too, it's not all negative, because we are going to talk about how to cope and how to better manage these things as well too. So we're going to talk about a better path to go down as well too today. Yeah, so like I was saying, these are all the symptoms of anxiety, and these are all the things that we kind of know happen to people when they're feeling anxious. And then, yeah, I would just say, I'm going to touch on the fear and the avoidance as well, because when we are feeling anxious, or when we are just struggling with anxiety or depression, one of the ways that people respond to that is to avoid. So whether it's avoiding through, drinking too much, or using drugs, or whatever the case may be, or just avoiding situations altogether, like, for example, with a job seeker, I'm so overwhelmed with everything that's going on. I just can't manage to look for jobs today, or to go out and try to seek new opportunities. There really is that avoidance that comes in as well too. So we have our funny little guy here that kind of talks about how anxiety feels like. So we talked about some of the symptoms of anxiety in the last slide. So this is kind of how physiologically what we go through when we're experiencing anxiety. So things like, higher blood pressure, a lot of sweating. I always like to tell this story. I have a young nephew, and we were at the CN Tower in Toronto a few years ago, and we were going to go up to the top, and he was trying to say that he wasn't nervous, but I was holding his hand and he was sweating profusely. So, I was asking him, are you sure you're not nervous? And he kept on saying no. But I mean, even when we try to say, or when we try to convince ourselves that we're not going through anxiety, physiologically, we can still be doing things like sweating, taking short breaths, our blood pressure can be up. Our bodies can still be going through anxiety, even when our minds are trying to tell us that we're not. And I just think one of the really important parts, or one of the really important things that we're going to talk about today, and like I said, we're going to talk about grounding techniques a little bit later on today, is a lot of the times when we're having an anxiety response, our body's automatic reaction is to have short breaths. And that goes into that fight or flight response, where we need those short little breaths to kind of get us going to whatever direction we're going to go to. But a really good way to cope with anxiety, especially in the moment, is just to take a deep breath. Because when we're taking those short breaths, we're not getting enough oxygen into our brains to really help our brain and our function and our body function optimally like it should. So just taking a few minutes just to, like, for example, if you're nervous about going into a job interview, taking a few minutes just to, sit down and take 10 deep breaths and get centered can be so helpful to not only help you, to not only help some of the physical reactions of anxiety, but to just help get your body in a better state to kind of deal with what you have to deal with in the moment. So like I said, and I kind of alluded to this in the last slide, but that flight or fight response, it's evolved over millions of years to help us confront or escape danger. So when something anxiety provoking happens to us, we automatically go into this response. And like I said, breathing more quickly, increased heart rate, sweating, and the mind becomes focused on the threat to scan the environment. So that's kind of a really quick kind of a general overview of what anxiety is and what happens to our bodies and what happens to our minds when we're going through anxiety, when we're going through an anxiety response. So now we're going to look a little bit more, looking just at past, because I know, when I talked about some of the past anxiety and how that kind of affects us in our present day, we're going to talk a little bit more about past anxiety and how we can focus more on and how we can help ourselves cope with that a little bit more, so that we can focus more on the present moment and the ultimate goal of, being a resilient job seeker and being able to cope with all this anxiety and these different things that happen to us, and be resilient to be able to go out and do the things we need to do to find new opportunities. So specifically, like I touched on in the beginning of the presentation here, the reason why a person becomes a job seeker can be a very much a grief experience. Through losing a job or losing employment or losing an opportunity can be a grief experience. Even sometimes if let's say if someone's looking for work because they just finished school. Let's say someone, finished 4 years, 8 years, however many years of school that they went to. That in itself can be a grief experience. So that in itself can be anxiety provoking. A lot of the times when we talk about grief and loss, people may only associate that with loss through a death. But grief can be so many other things. Any kind of a loss can start a grief reaction. So anything like, the loss of a job, a divorce, loss of friendships through a loss of a job. So people who you used to know from the job that you're no longer with, losing those friendships can be a grief and a loss experience as well too. Loss of hopes and dreams, all of those things can start a grief experience. And for many people, losing a job can be the beginning of a difficult grieving period because it also represents a loss in lifestyle, security, and status. And now what's really difficult about a job loss is that it falls under this category of ambiguous and disenfranchised grief. So what that basically means is that it's not really recognized. It's not a recognized type of loss, and it's not the type of loss that people, maybe not understand, but maybe not recognize how significant it is to go through. Sometimes, when a loss is through, if you lose someone because they pass away, that's more recognized in society. But when you lose a job and the kind of the grief process that happens, that's not as well recognized. And what that means is that there's just not that time. There's oftentimes it's kind of overlooked in that time to kind of grieve and to give yourself some space to process the emotions that go along with that loss often don't happen. Another example of ambiguous loss and disenfranchised grief is losing a pet. A lot of people, for a lot of people, losing a pet could be a very significant loss for them. But for a lot of people, it's not recognized how significant that loss is. So I would say that the biggest thing, or the biggest obstacle that comes along with ambiguous loss is that you don't give yourself that time to process the emotions. And because there isn't that time to process what you go through, the loss can become prolonged or complicated. So what's really important about a loss like a job loss is to just recognize, just to take a moment to reflect, whether that be through journaling or just having a moment just to sit and look and just recognize what you went through and how that's really affected you. And to kind of give yourself some time to just sit down and think, losing that previous job affected me in the following ways. Or graduating from school and having that major life transition affected me in the following ways. So really giving yourself that time to recognize what you went through and some space to process that is really helpful in terms of helping people deal with this ambiguous loss that happens. And, and I know there's just that temptation to just say, well, now I just have to hit the road running and, get onto this next stage of my life. But grief is the sort of thing, if you don't kind of take the time to process it, it can keep on coming up. So that's why it's so important. And that's why we include it at CMHA when we talk about loss, to really give yourself that time and that space to talk about the grief as well. So I know that we just, we have the Q&A function here. So I'm just going to read a couple of these questions and see if anybody has any comments or any reflections from them. So does anybody here recognize the grief after losing a job or graduating from school or anything like that comes along that creates, or that, that is the situation that makes you find yourself being a job seeker? And then if you've recognized this grief, how have you managed it? And how do you see the best way to move forward from this grief?
I don't think I'm seeing the answers. At least no one is posting that I can see.
Okay.
So I'm not being very helpful.
That's okay. You know what? We have in the next slide here, we have some ways to kind of cope with grief and cope with loss. So
and I do have two questions that have come up. So
sure.
Maybe when we finish this, or do you want to ask them?
Maybe we'll go ahead and ask the questions right now.
Okay. So one question was, is grief different from fear, or is anxiety? What's the difference between anxiety and fear? Sorry, I couldn't read.
No, that's okay. So like I said, anxiety and fear, they're interrelated. Because a lot of the times when we experience anxiety, it's because of a fear. And anxiety is often the fear of something that may happen. Okay. So they're different, but they're related in the same way. Right. And a lot of the times when we're really fearful, that can start an anxiety reaction for us.
So there can be a cause and effect.
Absolutely.
Between the two. Okay. Thank you. And would you say that health issues such as cancer and job loss and financial loss would affect a person for a longer time in terms of how they experience grief?
Yeah, absolutely. So then the question is, do other things like you could have do other things like having of cancer or health issues, do those kind of prolong grief? Is that what the question was
Yes, I think
asking?
that's the question. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say, I always like to use this example, like I have a cup here. And there's so many, there's so many kind of emotional things that I can hold in my cup. So I lost a job. Okay, putting something in the cup here. I was recently diagnosed with an illness, putting something in the cup here. I had something else that happened to me, putting something in the cup here. Eventually the cup is going to overflow. So it's kind of this idea of that idea of, like I was talking about earlier, that we all have life and we all have things that we deal with. And there's only so much that we can cope with. So absolutely, the more you put in your cup, the fuller it's going to get.
Right.
The more that happens. Yeah, no, I was just going to say, the more that happens to you, the less space you have to kind of move through and cope with these things.
We always think about sayings that are passed down, and the straw that broke the camel's back. When you think, you're coping, and then all of a sudden it's difficult to cope.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's so easy to be able to say that we need to set boundaries, we need to have, self-care, all of those kind of things, but it really is difficult to act on it on a daily basis. And so
Absolutely.
curious about any tips for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I agree with that, that statement 100%. I have a family, and I think I really relate to that idea of, you want to give 100% to everyone, but you just, where is the line drawn? Where do you put the boundaries in? So when I talk about self-care, I really talk about self-care as just the basic 4 foundational things. And then there's everything else as well too. But I really talk about those foundational things of making sure that, you're sleeping, you're getting the amount of sleep you need to get. You are eating healthy foods, you're drinking water, and you're doing some sort of, you're moving your body, which doesn't mean you have to go to the gym 2 hours a day, which means after work, you go for a walk around the block. So I really talk about that as the foundation of self-care, so that you can give of yourself to all of your other responsibilities that you have as well too. So really, when you're doing those 4 things and you're focusing on, again, sleeping, eating healthy, drinking enough water, getting some sort of movement and exercise in, that's really when you are taking care of yourself. And that may mean things, looking at the example with the families, that may mean things like the vacuuming doesn't get done. Or, or you have to, ask for help for childcare. Or, I think just the example of, ordering out or ordering or going out for dinner instead of being able to cook every night. Like all those things, like looking at all those things that you can do to make life easier for yourself so that you can focus on those things. And then setting boundaries when you need to, letting people know that you can't do things, saying no when saying no makes sense. So that's a really important boundary. And that's even, so we've had this discussion about grief and loss, and how it affects, how grief and loss can make you feel anxiety. So when we look at some of our positive coping mechanisms here, which is the next slide, the first positive coping mechanism is saying no when you are not able to help and participate. So in terms of just a really easy way to set boundaries is just giving yourself permission to say no, giving yourself permission to take a break. These are all things, letting yourself know that you're going through this difficult grieving process, you're going through this difficult loss, and you're going to try to employ some of these positive coping mechanisms so that you're better able to manage and better able to deal with these things. And I just wanted to note too that these positive coping mechanisms, they're part of the handout that everybody's going to have access to. So yeah, everybody will have access to this list of positive coping mechanisms. So these are all really great ways to set boundaries and to take care of yourself. If you look at the second one here, taking 5 minutes to do a breathing exercise, giving yourself permission to take a break, spending time with friends and family, going for a walk, watching a movie, all of these things are really, really positive coping mechanisms about how to deal with loss and how to deal with anxiety and how to take care of ourselves. So like I said, this list is part of the handout, so everybody will have that. The handout.
Oh, I do have a comment, if
Yeah,
you don't
absolutely.
mind.
Yep.
So someone has said doing the 4 things, they are doing the 4 things, yet they still do feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
But they do find that setting boundaries and saying no has helped. So, understanding that just because you're doing those 4 things, maybe it doesn't totally disappear and go away. I mean, sometimes we have to live with certain things, but I really like 21, eat a little bit of chocolate, giving yourself permission for, having something that you really enjoy. And someone else asked if this webinar is being recorded, and it is. You can find it on the YouTube channel for Talent Pool. And the previous workshops we've done are also on that. So if you know someone else who can use Kara's advice, then it's free to share. Thank you, Kara, for letting me interrupt there.
Oh, not a problem. If anything comes up, please do. Yeah, and for the 4 foundational things, like I mentioned, sleeping, eating properly, drinking water, and exercising, you can think of that more of the foundation of taking care of yourself, but then you also have more things that you can do on top of that. So those are the 4 really important things to do. And then, like that person commented, setting boundaries, saying no, having positive people in your life. All of these other positive coping mechanisms are all ways or different things to put on that foundation of taking care of yourself to better cope with loss, anxiety, and to make you a more resilient job seeker. And then on the flip side of the positive coping mechanisms, we also have these negative coping mechanisms here. And, I just want to say we're all human. I think, everybody can probably say they've, myself included, that they've done some of these more negative coping mechanisms at one point in their life. So this isn't to kind of shame or point the finger at anybody, because like I said, I think we all have done these at some point. It's more of just recognizing that, yes, these are ways that we cope with problems, but they're just not the best ways of coping with problems. And they often, create more problems when we cope with things in this way. So, when we use negative self-talks, when we kind of beat ourselves up in our heads over things that we're struggling with, when we eat excessive junk food. So like Lynn said, it's okay to eat a little bit of chocolate every now and again, just to kind of give yourself a little bit of a boost or a little bit of reward. But it's when you're excessively eating, junk food every day, that's when it becomes more of a negative coping mechanism. Excessive drinking, I think the same thing. Having a glass of wine is fine. Having 3 bottles of wine, that's where it becomes, a negative coping mechanism. So all of these things, like I said, they're just here to kind of note that, yes, this is a way to cope, but not the most positive way to cope, and can create problems. Whereas if we look at our positive coping mechanisms, these are all things that are great ways to cope. And, instead of creating problems, often lead us closer to the solution, or at least get us into a better mindset more long-term when we look at coping in this way as well. So the next thing that we're going to look at, unless there were any questions that came up there, and maybe this is about halfway through my part of the presentation before Kirsten comes in. So maybe this might be a good opportunity for me to just kind of ask if there were any other questions that came up about the first part of the presentation before we look at some of the anxiety and how to cope with some of the anxiety that comes with applying for jobs.
So we do have an individual who said that they actually cleaned up their Facebook and clutter,
Mhm.
and that it really helped, and only positive relationships moving forward. And certainly, if anybody belongs to social media, there does tend to be more negative than there is positive on it. So you might want to consider that as a way of coping and staying positive.
Yeah.
And the affirmation, this too shall pass. Once again, we have these sayings that have been passed down through generations, and it's because there is a kernel of truth in all of them. And so when we think we're stuck somewhere, we know that we're not stuck there forever.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that idea of just reminding yourself that this too shall pass. Nothing lasts forever. Even though, you may not be exactly where you want to be in life in this moment, that doesn't mean that you're going to be stuck there for the rest of your life, because things change. And I also kind of like the idea of the growth that can happen too, the growth and the kind of personal growth and personal development that can happen through the struggles or through some of the more unhappy times in our life. So kind of, even though it is you may be going through something negative, there may be some positive growth that comes out of it. Yeah.
That's true. I will, because no one's writing questions down. I'm just going to share a quick story, because I had a very serious car accident many years ago. I won't even say how many, because it tells how old I am, but many years ago. And I was devastated because I could not continue doing the work I was doing. But through that whole experience, I fell into career development. And I kind of feel like this field was made for me. And if you'd asked me when I was in that turmoil and angst around losing my old work, I would have never been able to foresee that I could find something that was truly a great fit for me that I hadn't considered before. So I always think that lessons learned to gain wisdom. Yes, someone wrote that down. We never know what the future holds, and it can sometimes be better than what we had in the past, right?
Mhm.
So that kind of attitude of hopefulness is something we need to share. So thank you for people people asking or sending me little notes here.
Absolutely. And Lynn, thank you for sharing your story too. I love, I love that story, or hearing stories about that, about how, you can be stuck or feel like something's very difficult in the moment, but then, everything kind of turns out, and there is happiness after kind of that struggle, or after those changes. So yeah, I think that's a good reminder for everyone too, who's looking for a job. A good way to stay resilient is to just kind of remember that things do change, and things do change for the better. Absolutely. So the next thing that we're going to look at is the freeze response that comes from anxiety. So like we were talking about earlier in the presentation, a lot of the times when we feel anxious about something, there's that tendency to freeze, or that tendency to kind of avoid the problem, to just kind of not, to just kind of say, this just feels too overwhelming. I'm just feeling too anxious about this. I'm just going to avoid this to avoid that anxious feeling. So, so as a job seeker, a way to stay resilient is to really, I guess, try to push yourself to face the problem and to do the things that need to be done throughout your job search. And I kind of like to think of this as, if you're thinking of a children's story of like a train going through a mountain, you can't go around it, you can't go on top of it, you just have to go kind of like through the tunnel. So it's this idea of, you just have to do this. I think a lot of the times with anxiety, it's just so much easier to avoid the problems and to not do the things, because then you don't feel the anxiety. But in reality, that just makes the anxiety grow, because then the next time something happens, it's that thought of, okay, if I just don't do it, then I just won't have to. So that's very normal. That's a very normal reaction to anxiety, because we're all human and we all want to avoid these really hard feelings, or these there are these things that can be really difficult to do. So really by challenging ourselves and by facing our fears, That's what really helps us manage the anxiety. So what I'm going to look at next is scheduling, and this idea of behavioral activation. So behavioral activation, it's just a fancy way of saying writing down things that you want to do throughout the week so that you have a plan and you know, and you have a schedule to follow. So this is behavioral activation really helps deal with symptoms of depressions or feeling low, because it helps keep people motivated to take those steps towards the goal that you need to take. And behavioral activation, it's a really positive way to develop a schedule and support positive mental health.
If I may, someone just mentioned that sometimes we need to pause, reflect, and then move forward.
Absolutely.
And so they say they can overcome flight and fright and fight. However, freeze is a challenge. And so when you're giving this example, you're kind of giving an example to really help this person cope with that freeze reaction. And someone else wanted to know, how is cry considered a positive mechanism? Oh man, having a good cry?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, the way, I think a lot of people, there's this idea that crying is maybe a sign of something not going right, but really crying, it's an emotional release. So it's kind of like, I like to think of crying as the emotions are just kind of coming out of you, right? So it's a way of getting the emotions out so that you're not ruminating on them, so that you're not stuck in the emotion. It's a way to express it. And, if you're crying every day and you don't know why, that's just like with the anxiety. If you're feeling anxiety every day and you don't know why, that's maybe a sign that you do need to, there may be something more significant happening and you do need to reach out for some help and some support. And again, there's no shame in that, just knowing that that's a sign that you may need some help and some support. But crying because you're upset and having that be a way to kind of let out the emotions and let out the anxiety and let out the grief, that's a really positive thing. It's almost like, talking about it, like sitting down. I know one of the positive coping mechanisms was having a heart to heart or talking to somebody that you trust. It's kind of the same way. It's just a way to kind of cope with and process the emotions.
So what happens if someone is unable to cry?
Yeah. Yeah, and that happens a lot. So if someone is unable to cry, what I would suggest is looking at different ways to process the emotions. So journaling is a wonderful way to process things. Just taking some time just to sit down with a pen or paper, or sit down with a laptop and type, whatever you prefer, and to just kind of journal about what happened, what's upsetting you, what you think is making you feel stuck. Those are all really positive ways to do that. If you just can't sit down and let it out through crying, journaling, talking are both wonderful ways as well too. Going to the gym and having a really good workout, getting some of the emotions out that way. All of those things are all really positive ways to kind of process and go through the emotions as well too.
Thanks for the answer. They said they do journal. And so
Yeah.
maybe that's the reason they journal, is it does give them an outlet to express their emotions.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Absolutely. So just looking at the behavioral activation activity, I have an example here of JJ, who's a job seeker, currently looking for work, but really feeling as though they're not getting enough done each day. So in this example too, they're probably really maybe kind of going through some negative self-talk, really thinking I'm not being productive, I'm not doing what I need to do each day, and feeling some frustration through that as well too. They find by the time they get the kids to school, they don't have enough time to focus on their job search. And this really makes them feel frustrated and stuck. And at the same time, they also feel like they're not spending enough time with friends. And this is making them feel maybe a little lonely, a little isolated, and a little depressed. So we're not going to work in pairs, but I do have an example here about a behavioral activation schedule that I made for JJ to give them more structure in their day, and also give them, a plan to look for work and to also spend time with friends. So like I said, we're not going to work on this in pairs, but if you refer to the handout again, the first part of the handout is the positive and negative coping mechanisms. And then the handout also has behavioral activation in it. So if you refer to the handout, you'll find this schedule, JJ's schedule here that was put together for them. And then there's also a blank schedule. So that's your opportunity to also create your own work, create your own week, and to use behavioral activation to plan and to have a positive way to manage your time going forward. So this is just a schedule that was put together for JJ. So I think what's important to note with the schedule too is that there is time, like if you look in the mornings here from 9 to 11, this is really where the focus is on looking for work. So these are just things that I put in here. So for everyone, for everybody's, for everyone's job search, it's so unique. So I just put in some pretty general things here, but you can change this to be more unique and to more tailored to your own job search. So I just put in some really general things here, like working on the resume, looking for jobs, networking on LinkedIn, and looking at different job sites for jobs. So like I said, this is really general here, but you can put in whatever works for your job search. There's also time for family. So from 3 to 5, that's when the kids are picked up, and that's kind of when they have family time. There's time for dinner, and then there's social time here as well too. So this is really in the evenings when JJ spends time, calling up a friends or family, has some time to relax by, going for a walk or watching some TV, or, really kind of schedules in that meeting with friends. So like I said, the idea behind this is to really have to really place things down and make things concrete of this is what I'm going to do and this is when I'm going to do it, to have that plan and to feel that sense of success and that sense of I can, make a plan and follow through with it. And so
okay, but really, shouldn't I be looking for a job 24/7? That's a question.
Yeah, so my response to that would be you shouldn't be doing anything 24/7, because that can really get you out of balance. And like I was talking about earlier, you have those 4 self-care things that you need to, that are really foundational and really important to focus on. So if you're looking for work 24/7, you're not sleeping properly. So you're not giving your body the rest that it needs, and you're not taking that time to get some, move your body, do something like that. So yeah, I would say I don't think looking for anything 24/7 is important. It's more important to kind of have that balance. So, but if somebody really does want to focus on their job search, they can, like if you look at JJ's schedule here, they have about around 4 hours a day that they're looking for work. If somebody wants to up that to 8 hours a day, like I said, this is the job search is very unique to each person. So if you wanted to schedule in 8 hours a day to look for work, that's, it's your schedule. It's your, whatever you think would work best for your unique job search. But then to also, for those other 16 hours, also have time to cook food, make good food for yourself, go for a walk. We're almost in the middle of March here. So the weather is getting better and the days are getting longer. So just take that time to have that balance, so that, you are well rested and well-rounded, and you are doing the things that you need to do to deal with the anxiety that the job seeker faces.
Okay, so I've got a few comments here. So one person said they love it. She does, or they do it daily. Thanks for qualifying my schedule and being on, making sure I'm on the right track. And then it's great for goal setting and accomplishments. Each day is a new beginning. So if you just even get one thing done, you're successful. Don't make a huge long list because you're going to feel like a failure. Just do one thing. And then how often should people review and plan if it's not working?
Yeah, so I would say that if it's not working piece, like if you say, okay, next week, March 14th, I'm going to start with my Monday and then plan my Monday through my Friday. you do that and it's just a complete disaster and it doesn't work, then it might be time to look at this again. And, I like those comments of maybe just one thing, maybe just, instead of trying to plan out your whole day, just say Monday I'm going to do this, Tuesday I'm going to do that, or maybe it's a week at a time. So maybe it could be something like, next week I'm going to apply for 5 jobs, or next week I'm going to try to network a little bit, or maybe see if there's any kind of consulting opportunity, whatever it is that you're looking for, whatever your job search is, to kind of adjust it that way. For this, in the handout, the worksheet for behavioral activation is exactly like this. It's, these 5 different time slots to fill in. But for some people, maybe something like morning and afternoon works better. So in the morning, I'm going to work on this. In the afternoon, I'm going to work on that. So yeah, I guess it's kind of, if it's working, great. Keep if it's working and it feels good, keep on doing it. If it's not working and it doesn't feel good, maybe try something else.
Okay. And so, someone did respond saying, I'm so glad you answered this question. So thank you, Kara, for providing that. Mm-hmm. And then another question is, why is maintaining a positive outlook so important during the job search?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say too, because just like what we've been kind of focusing on today, that looking for work can be such a difficult and emotionally ridden experience, that really trying to challenge that and to cope with that, keeping a positive attitude and doing the things that you need to do really helps you better deal with things. It's kind of like, again, looking at this example of this cup, and there's only so much you can put in your cup. By taking care of yourself and by having a positive attitude, it's almost like your cup doubles in size, so that you can just deal with that many more things. If you're not taking care of yourself and you're not focusing on having a positive attitude, your cup shrinks, or there's less room to kind of deal with life as life happens, because life is going to happen to everybody.
Your capacity declines. So someone said, if you are dealing with grief and loss, your attitude comes through in your applications. So measure your thought processes daily. So kind of, I guess they're saying, do a check-in and see how you're feeling that day and how you might be responding maybe to some of the questions that are asked, in an application or something. I'm making some assumptions here.
Yeah, exactly. And really working on having that positive mindset and positivity helps you to, when you are in interviews or when you are answering questions, really present yourself with having that attitude, and present yourself in a more positive way.
Thank you. That's all the questions and comments so far.
Perfect. So like I said, there is, if you look at the handout, along with the positive and negative coping mechanisms, there's also the behavioral activation example. And then there is a blank behavioral activation that you can fill in. But then also remember, like we talked about, there is the worksheet, but you can do behavioral activation if it makes more sense to do it in more of a fluid or way that's tailored to your unique job search. Absolutely, go ahead and do that as well too. So the last thing that we're gonna look at here, like I said, one of my colleagues is gonna come in and teach some grounding techniques for the last little bit of the presentation. The last thing we're gonna look at is negative thoughts. And I love that question about maintaining a positive mindset, why that's so important, was just asked, because it's a good kind of transition and introduction to this. That, we're all human. We all go through anxiety. We all go through our grief and loss processes, and we all have negative thoughts. So like I've already mentioned, looking for work can be a difficult process with lots of negative setbacks and negative thoughts associated with that. So the next thing, the next thing we're going to look at is how cognitive behavioral therapy can help you manage negative thoughts that creep up or happen around the job search. So before we kind of get into some cognitive behavioral therapy and some techniques to help you better manage negative thoughts, what I want to ask are, if anybody feels comfortable sharing, what are some of the negative thoughts that they've had towards their job search, and any reasons why they may have had these thoughts, and maybe a little, if anybody has any comments or any reflections on why it's important to challenge any negative thoughts that you may have had about the job search.
Okay, well, we have one question here around how do I deal with people's negative reactions to being out of work while I look for a job? So I kind of feel like maybe this is a family situation where, looking for a job, but other people are maybe not as supportive for that person.
Okay, yeah. And that's, so the situation is that other family members are being negative towards the person's job search. And I'm just going to take the, use an example of maybe other family members are upset about the job loss. Is that kind of what the question is alluding to?
I believe so. I think it's just how do you react to other people that are being negative
Other people's
about the
negativity.
situation.
Yeah, of course. Okay, well, that, what, let's take that example and look at our first kind of technique that we have. So I'm going to talk about the 5-factor model of helping to manage thoughts. So, and I'm going to use that example that was given of other people's negativity towards the job search. So we all have things that happen to us in life. But then so we all have an event that happens. So let's say the event is, I lost my job and my family is really negative towards the job loss. So we all have this event that could happen. But then we all have our own individual's thoughts, emotions, bodily reactions, and behaviors that happens. So the event could be, I lost my job. And then the thought could be something like, well, I lost my job and this is horrible. And everybody in my family is upset with me. And, I'm never going to find another job. I'm just using that as an example of that's what the thoughts could be. So if that's what the thoughts are, this person who has these kind of thoughts, they're going to have a lot of probably really negative emotions that come up around those thoughts. So their emotions, if their thought is, I lost my job and it's terrible and everybody in my family is mad at me, the emotions would be anger, resentment, frustration, a lot of really negative emotions. And then the bodily reactions would be something, probably like their blood pressure going up, their muscles would get tense, their stomach would probably turn, a lot of really negative things happening in their body. And then their behavior could, because, they have all these negative things happen, their behavior could be a lot of different things. Their behavior could be something like arguing with family members. Avoiding, just being so upset that they're not doing the behavioral activation that we just talked about. Instead of doing that, they are, instead of doing that, they're just kind of isolating, or, we talked about sleep, maybe getting way too much sleep, or spending time, or just kind of avoiding the job search altogether because they're just so upset about the situation and it just feels so overwhelming. So this is a really kind of negative kind of spiral that we get into. But let's use the 5-factor model to think about this in a more positive way. Like, let's say that the person loses their job and they think, yeah, this, I lost my job. Obviously, this isn't a good thing, but I'm going to focus on how I can reinvent myself through looking for a better opportunity, maybe a more stable opportunity. So maybe their emotion, the emotions would probably be still a little bit negative in this situation, But they may also feel some joy in that I'm going to look for a better, or I'm going to look for other life opportunities, and maybe more doors will open up for me because of this. Or they could feel some, some happiness over being able to think, yeah, I do have control over my life, and I do have some control over the things that happen to me. Their bodily reactions would be a little bit more positive, instead of that kind of really tense, like, oh, I'm so upset and my muscles are all tense. It would be more of, okay, I'm just going to maybe feel a little bit better, take a deep breath, and organize and do the things that I need to do. And then their behaviors could be, this person who has the more positive thoughts about the job loss and about, their behaviors could be more of, like we just talked about, I'm going to make a plan, I'm going to make a schedule for the week or the month to be able to do the things that I need to do. So I guess what I'm trying to say is we all have things that happen to us. We all have events that happen to us that are a lot of the times out of our control. A job loss a lot of the times is out of our control. Sometimes companies downsize. Sometimes people make decisions that, these decisions are made that we don't make, and we just have to cope with them. So how our thoughts, our emotions, our physical reactions, and our behaviors, those are all the sorts of things that we have a little bit more control over, and we can have some more control over our thoughts and our behaviors. And I think the only thing that I was going to add too is that if anybody wants to know more about this or learn more about cognitive behavioral therapy and how it can help them better manage thoughts and behaviors and better manage their job search, I know, Lynn, you said that there's some wonderful resources, some mental health resources that you're sharing. So those, people, this is just a kind of a fast introduction presentation going over some of these ideas. But there's always that opportunity to connect with a mental health therapist and learn more and work on this a little bit more, in depth with them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'll just get back to the presentation here. Just bear with me for a moment while I bring this back up and get back to the slide that we were at after playing the video.
And we have had a couple of questions, but they're not really related, but we'll look
Save
at
those for the end
session.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So like I said, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at different ways to help examine the thoughts that we have and look at how our thoughts affect our emotions and our mind states and our behaviors as well too. So what we're going to look at, and again, this activity is part, referring to the handout again, this activity is part of the handout that everybody's going to get. So what we're going to look at next is different ways to reframe our thoughts. Because like we learned in the video, and like we talked about, the way that we think about situations that happen, so the way that we think about losing a job, or, for example, another situation that may happen is going for a job interview and unfortunately not getting the job. The way that we think about this situation can really affect how we feel about it, the emotions that we have about it, and our behaviors afterwards and what we do afterwards. So reframing our thoughts and having more positive thoughts is a powerful tool that can help us have a different perspective on situations we face in life. And like I said too, events happen to us. We lose a job, we apply for a job and we don't hear back, or we have an interview that we unfortunately aren't the successful candidate for the event. So things happen to us in life. But how we think about these things and how we think about the situation, this is something that we have control over. And this is something that affects our feelings, actions, and our physiological reactions, our bodily reactions. So again, we're going to spend a few minutes looking at reframing thoughts. And I'm going to look at an example here of reframing thoughts. So again, this what you're seeing on the slide here, This is part of the packet that everyone's getting to take away from them. So everybody can kind of, I'm gonna introduce the idea of reframing negative thoughts. So everybody will have this. And you can work on this yourself after the presentation about any kind of negative thoughts that you have, how to reframe them to have a better outcome. So the first example I'm going to look at here of reframing thoughts is something that everybody's experienced. So I'm just going to give the example of you're driving on the Deerfoot and somebody cuts you off, or you're driving on some street and somebody cuts you off. So that's the event. That's what happened. So the first thought that you could have is something like, what a jerk, that person cut me off. Why aren't the cops around when you need them? This is such an awful thing that happened to me. So if that's the thought that you have, the consequence, or what happens next, is your blood pressure goes up. You can, get really tense, unroll the window, start screaming at the person, road rage ensues. All of these other, I'm not saying that this is exactly what happens to everybody here, but this is the potential for all of these other things that could happen. So all of these things could happen, and all of these other negative consequences could happen because the first thought was really a negative, like, I need to, kind of in that fight zone of, I'm so upset, and all these other things need to happen. So that's kind of the first scenario. Someone cuts you off in traffic. That's the thought that you have. And then this is really the consequence of having that kind of thought. So let's go back to this scenario. Like I said, life happens, the event happens. Let's go back to this scenario of somebody cuts you off in traffic. So instead of having the first negative thought of, that person's such a jerk, why aren't the cops around? Maybe your thought is, maybe that person didn't see me. It's a good thing I'm a good driver, and I leave enough space that I was able to brake in time so that we didn't get into an accident. So that's the thought that you have instead. So from that, the consequence is you slow down, you pay more attention to what's going on, and you safely get to wherever it was that you were going to that day. So this is a really good example of how our thoughts can really affect our day and what happens to us. So we go from, this one example where it's road rage and the person's, just so upset and physiologically high blood pressure, tense muscles, all those different things, to, all right, I'm just going to, obviously that wasn't pleasant getting cut off in traffic, and, definitely recognizing that wasn't a pleasant thing, but I'm a responsible driver, so I'm just going to drive more safely. And so this person in the second, and this person who has the more positive thought, or the more neutral thought, has a better day and a better rest of their day after the unpleasant event of being cut off in traffic. Whereas the person who has the really negative thought then has, a lot of really negative things that happen to them afterwards. So that's the first example. Does anybody have maybe an example that they want an event, something that they can suggest that we could also work through this?
Well, we've got two questions that are kind of connected to interview.
Okay.
And so I wonder if we can kind of, mash them together. So one person was saying that they get quite anxious when preparing for job interviews, and so that anxiety, doesn't help them as they're in the interview. And the other one is, sorry, let me just find it here. And so the other person said that they kind of have interview burnout, which I have to say, if they're getting interviews, they're doing something right, and that should be a positive thing, but they are experiencing that, and the negativity comes when you go for interviews, but you aren't selected. Yeah. And so how would you reframe those negative interview experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's, like you said, Len, let's kind of blend that. So the event that happened was The event that happened was I had an interview and I didn't get the job. So that's the event. So whether it's a positive thought and reaction or a negative thought and reaction, the event is going to be the same. So this first column here, what happened is going to be, I had an interview that I wasn't the successful candidate for. So the thought could be something like, oh, I'm never going to find work, right? That would be the negative thought. I'm never going to find work. There's something, or maybe even it could be something more negative, like maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm just unhireable. That leads back into the thought of I'm never going to find work. So really kind of more negative thoughts. So the consequence, if that's kind of where the person stays with that, the consequence of that could really be something like just being upset. And if your thinking is I'm never going to find work, then maybe that leads to, well, what's the point? What's the point? Why am I even looking for jobs? Which can, I agree with you said, if someone's getting interviews, they're obviously doing something right. So the thought could be, I'm never going to find work, so I'm just not going to apply for jobs, which kind of really leads down that which really kind of leads somebody down that negative spiral. But if somebody kind of challenges that and then they try to have more positive thoughts, like you said, Lynn, well, I must be doing something right because I am getting interviews. So that could be the thought, even though I didn't get this job, I'm doing something right. So let's keep on doing that something right. Or if they just say, you know what, I didn't get this job, but I didn't see the other, probably 4 or 5 people that interviewed for the job. Maybe there was somebody there who just had more experience than I did, or, for whatever reason was picked. And it's not about me. It's just about, it's just about that other person maybe just had a little bit of a leg up on me, but maybe the next job I'll be, maybe for the next job maybe for the next job I'll be the number one candidate for the next one. So when you have those more positive thoughts, then the consequence, what happens afterwards will be a little bit different. So maybe what happens afterwards is, instead of really kind of like beating yourself up and just kind of thinking there's something wrong with me, maybe it's more of, okay, I didn't get this job, kind of, and letting yourself know that's, I'm not happy about it. I'm not happy about what happened, but I'm just going to go back to, I'm just going to realize that I still have things to offer. And I'm still going to be able to go back and maybe look for more work next week, and kind of, even though I would have been really happy with this job, go back to looking for work. So you're still doing the things that you need to do to get work. So instead of saying, this is just so overwhelming, I can't look for work anymore, it's more of saying, okay, this wasn't the best, but I'm still gonna focus on what I need to do. And maybe, this is also an opportunity to kind of think like, well, maybe I need to work on my interviewing skills. Right. So again, maybe there's nothing there. That doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with me, but maybe I need to look at what the resources are in the Calgary area or Alberta area to help me better myself in an interview, so that I can represent myself a little bit differently, which can make a world of difference to the interviewers when you're able to kind of work on presenting yourself in a more confident way, or just talk about your skills better, whatever it is. So maybe instead of, the negative consequence of I'm just not going to apply for work, you have a more positive consequence of, yeah, maybe I'll look for different sort of classes or opportunities to just represent myself better in an interview. Because it's not that I am unhireable, but just like with anybody, maybe I can improve the way that I'm presenting myself. Exactly. Or maybe have somebody help me focus on different things.
Great advice. Thank you.
Yeah. Is there any other kind of examples that came up that we can work through with reframing negative thoughts?
I don't have No, I think it says, I think Kara already cleared my confusion.
Okay.
What an employer
Good.
does is beyond
Excellent.
me, so I just focus on what I can do as a job seeker, which I think is really important that you've mentioned, that we need to focus on what we can control, because we can't control everything else around us, right?
Yeah.
So when you're talking about reframing negative thoughts.
Exactly. Yeah, and exactly. And that's the thing, is that when you're looking for work, whether you're not hearing back from employers, which is unfortunately the reality sometimes, or you either don't hear back, or you just get a email back saying that your resume has been received. It can create a lot of negative thoughts. So by really reframing some of these negative thoughts, it helps you focus more on what you can do, because there's so many things that for the job seeker that are out of your control, this really helps you focus on the things that you can do to stay positive and to present yourself in the most positive way.
And do you have any tips on how we can keep our negative thoughts from creeping in on all aspects of our life, not just job search? Is
Yeah.
there little tips that you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. So, this reframing negative thoughts, and like I said, this worksheet is part of the package that everybody who's here today gets. So this can be used for really anything. So maybe the negative thought is something about your family, or the negative event is something that happened in your family or within like your friendship circle, or you went out and somebody was rude to you. These are all things that you can use this to work through, these reframing negative thoughts. You can really use this to work through any sort of a situation. So really the event that happened, maybe the thought that you had, and how you can challenge that thought to reframe it in a more positive way, and kind of the consequences behaviorally, and what you do afterwards, and how that's different depending on your thoughts.
Yeah, and someone suggested that perhaps taking action can also help us change our thoughts. So if you're not, say, if you're not getting interviews, or you're not being successful in your job search, maybe you need to take some courses, or maybe you need to upgrade. Not always, courses that you have to pay for, but also courses that can help your confidence. And by taking those courses, that are applicable to what you're doing, that might also influence your thoughts and turn them from negative to positive. So feeling more capable, or you've got competent.
Yeah, exactly. That's a wonderful comment. Exactly. That's what it's all about. It's about, and kind of like the video alluded to, you can change your thoughts, you can change your behaviors, those are kind of the easiest ones to do, but that all, a change in a thought changes then your behaviors, your emotion, and how your body reacts. A change in your behaviors changes how you think, how the emotions that you have, and how your body reacts. So all these things, it's a 4-part model, because all these things affect and interact with one another.
And someone also mentioned about sorry, just a sec, I just lost this, that, it's difficult if someone is always pinpointing your mistakes, noticing when you make mistakes, but you don't really notice when you're doing well. And I have to admit, my husband always tells me I do this. And I think, focus on the positive, focus on the positive. But it is easy for people to focus on the negative. Any suggestions? How do you respond to that?
Yeah, so I would say, in terms of if there's someone in your life that's really just always making negative comments, that's where boundaries can come in. And, maybe if it's possible, just if you find that someone's really negative in your life, if it's possible to spend less time with them, go ahead and do that. If they're your teenagers or something like that, you obviously can't spend less time with them. But then maybe it's having a conversation about, I really don't appreciate, and again, using I language and saying, I feel bad when you say these things about me. Of course, I do want to learn and grow and change, but when someone's always saying, you're doing something terrible, you're doing this, you're doing that, it doesn't feel very good for anyone. So really kind of setting those boundaries with people and letting them know how this makes you feel.
Thank you. And someone suggested volunteering can also help make us feel competent and well, they didn't use that word. I threw that word in. It can help. Someone told me once that he had sent his resume to many employers but never got an interview, and he thought it was prejudice or racism. And when I looked at his resume, I realized it was just a really poor resume. And so sometimes we create our own kind of imaginings of what's taking place, and it's kind of fantasy rather than really being able to see what the truth is or the facts.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so important. And that's why, when we can do things a little bit differently, instead of, just getting really frustrated and giving up, when we can just sit back and objectively say, oh, maybe my resume needs to be a little bit different. Or like I was talking about before, maybe I need some more interviewing skills or need to work on my interviewing skills. That's really where we see a lot of growth and a lot of resilience in what we're doing, and really gives us the tools that we need to be able to reach our goals.
Thank you. I think we've wrapped up the questions so far. I've got one question, but I'm going to save it for the end.
Yeah, and you know what? With that being said, we are pretty much at the end right now, because I know Kirsten is going to come on and do some grounding activities. So if there's any questions, we have about 5 minutes before Kirsten comes on.
Perfect. Okay. The question is, let me find it here because I have got a few. I saw a few items, Stacey, on the Canadian Mental Health Association Facebook page. One was a free program called Bounce Back. And I wondered if you could just maybe share a little bit of information about that.
Oh, absolutely. So Bounce Back, it's a program that, so what it is participants are matched with a mental health coach. And the mental health, and they're also given worksheets to work through. So worksheets that really focus on building skills to help cope with anxiety and depression. So you work through the worksheets, and then your mental health coach checks in with you just to see how you're doing and to answer any questions. And yeah, so it's a really great program. It has shown some really great results in terms of helping people cope with anxiety and depression. I don't know if I can put a link in here to it, but maybe that's something that can be included or that the participants can get. Even if anybody is more interested, just Google Bounce Back Canadian Mental Health Association, and you should, and you can just find it yourselves.
Yes.
There's a little bit more information about, there's a few more requirements that you need to sign up for the program. So if anybody's interested, like I said, it's a wonderful program. And I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on this, but I'm almost positive that all the coaching is done through phone or through video. So it's something that you can do at home and work through independently. But yeah, like I said, it's a really great program that's had really great results. And I'm pretty sure I don't work with the Bounce Back program, but I'm pretty sure it's offered nationwide. So wherever people are joining us today, they can access it. And like I said, because it's something that you work through mostly independently, that you can just do it kind of at home on your own time. Yeah, so if you want to find out more, I would say just Google Bounce Back Canadian Mental Health Association for more information. Because like I said, there are a few requirements that you need to go through for the process of signing up. But it is a wonderful program.
Okay, because the website does say that it's Ontario, BC, and Manitoba. It's part
Alberta does have it as well too. Yeah, I know. And like I said, I'm not, because I don't work specifically with the Bounce Back program. I'm not exactly too sure what the requirements are or where it is offered, but I know it is just so I would say Google Bounce Back Alberta Canadian Mental Health Association, because it is available in Alberta.
Thank you. Okay, and no one's asked, but I seem to remember from previous presentations I've been to that you also offer a recovery college, and that you also have peer support. And
yes, let me go to our last slide here, because here's where you can find more information. So just the top right-hand corner, the www.recoverycollege.ca, recoverycollegecalgary.ca. So what our Recovery College is it's absolutely, it's a free resource. So no cost for any of our programs through the Recovery College. And it's a health and wellness college. So we offer different courses, and all of them are based on health and wellness. We have a course on getting a better night's sleep. We have a course on building boundaries. We have a course on coping with current events. I think there's about 45 different offerings through the Recovery College. So if anybody's interested, just go to this website and you can learn more about what's offered through the Recovery College. For the time being, because the pandemic, everything is offered through Zoom. So the courses, they're different lengths. Some of them are, just a one-time 2-hour workshop that you do. Others of them are up to, I think, 8 weeks long. So it would be once a week for 8 weeks that you would take the course. But yeah, if anybody's interested, you can just go and do your research and find everything on there. Like I said, for the time being, everything is being offered via Zoom, but in the future, we may be offering our courses in person or over Zoom, whatever people prefer. But yeah, like I said, for the time being, everything's over Zoom for now.
Wow, thank you so much for this talk. It's been very informative. Someone just wrote, let me say it verbatim if I can. Kara, thanks so much for all the powerful tools you've handed to us. It's been very informative and empowering. And so, we do appreciate it. And certainly, it's wonderful to share this out with the community. So if anyone on here knows other people that can use these services, word of mouth is the best way to learn about what's available.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. So is it time now for
Yes, I think, like I said, Kirsten's just going to end us off in sticking with the theme of dealing with our different ways of coping with anxiety. Kirsten's going to teach some additional coping strategies to deal with anxiety as well too.
Okay, so it's my pleasure to introduce Kirsten. She's a passionate and driven mental health advocate. She wears many hats. She's a performing artist, she's a motivational speaker, and she's a writer. She's based here in Calgary, and she utilizes her extensive performing arts and creative writing backgrounds to spread her message and advocate for a more tolerant and inclusive future. Who doesn't want that, right? She's a recent recipient of Tourism Calgary's White Hat Award, and she's been widely recognized for her passion for helping others and making a positive difference in the world. And she makes big and small differences, and they are of equal importance because when you make a difference in someone's life, it changes lives. So thank you and welcome.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me here today. Can everyone hear me all right? Sounds good. Okay, perfect. So I am going to lead us through one grounding exercise and then a mindfulness meditation. So we know that mindfulness, bringing ourselves into the present moment, is really helpful for dealing with some of those uncomfortable emotions that may come up for us, right? Especially some of those anxious or fearful emotions. So one of the tools that I want to provide you with is something called the 3x3 method. And this was developed by Dr. Phil Boissier. So how this works is we are all going to look in our surroundings. So wherever you find yourself while you're watching this webinar, just take a look around the room. And I want you to pick one object. It can be anything, just to focus on. So pick that object. And while you're looking at the object, silently repeat the name of the object in your mind. So if I were looking at a lamp, I would keep saying the word lamp over and over again in my mind while looking at the lamp. While you do that, take a deep breath in through your nose and then slowly exhale through your mouth. Now I want you to look around the room and find a second object, and we're going to repeat the process. So take a deep breath in through your nose while naming the object in your mind. And slowly exhale through your mouth. Now look around the room and find your third and final object. Name it in your mind. Take a deep breath in through your nose and slowly exhale through your mouth. So the reason why this can be helpful, and you can do it 3 times, you can do it as many times as you need to do until you start to feel more of that calm coming over you. It helps to reduce our fight, flight, or freeze response by combining the element of that deep breathing piece, right? We know that that's kind of like a manual override to bring down some of that response. As well, the mindfulness can get us out of some of those thought spirals we might find ourselves in and bring us into that present moment. The great thing about this is you can do it anywhere, anytime. No one's going to know you're doing it. And so that can be quite helpful, right? Especially when we're in a moment where maybe we need to do a grounding exercise or something to bring down some anxiety, so we can focus on what the task at hand may be. For example, if we're just about to go into an interview. Another one that you can use is our 5 senses grounding exercise. So how this one works is you're going to use all 5 of your senses to, again, help bring you into the present moment. So I'll walk us through this one as well. If you can just look around the room and pick 5 objects to identify. They can be anything. So just silently identify 5 objects in your surroundings. Once you've looked at those 5 objects, I want you to notice 4 things that you can feel. So it could be the chair beneath you, could be your feet on the ground, your clothes on your skin, 4 different things that you can feel. And then I want you to pick 3 things that you can hear. So you can hear my voice right now. What are other things that you can hear in your surroundings? And then focus on 2 things that you can smell. You may not be able to smell 2 things in this moment, so you can also imagine 2 smells that you really enjoy. For example, your favorite scented candle, maybe it's your favorite flower, whatever that may be. Focus on 2 smells that you enjoy. And finally, our last sense is taste. So if you can taste something, perhaps it's your leftover breakfast, maybe you're drinking coffee. You can also choose to imagine a taste that you enjoy. If you're somewhere and you have maybe a mint or a piece of gum, you can use that as well to help ground you. So this is helpful, right? Again, brings us into that present moment. So those are 2 tools that you can use, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding and the 3 by 3 method. And I'm just going to walk us through a short guided meditation that's going to help us understand that we can have contradicting emotions that show up in our bodies at the same time, and knowing how to give space to those different emotions without letting them overwhelm us. So if you would like to find a comfortable position, you can remain seated. You can also choose to lie down on the floor if you feel more comfortable that way. Wherever you are, just take a moment to get comfortable. You can have your hands placed gently in your lap. You can choose to either close your eyes or just softly focus your gaze at a space on the floor in front of you. So today's meditation is going to focus on noticing the sensations in our body that can accompany the emotions we may be feeling. It will guide us through the discovery that it is possible to feel contrasting emotions and sensations in our body at the same time. Grief and peace, anger and acceptance, sadness and joy, discomfort and comfort. You may feel multiple emotions arising for you throughout the meditation today. Some may seem to be in direct opposition with each other. Know that this is natural. We are beings capable of duality. We are capable of turning our focus to the emotion that needs our attention most in this moment, while being aware of the others floating in the background. We are capable of finding a balance between feeling those emotions that may be uncomfortable and creating space for those which bring us a sense of calm and peace. We can learn to find space for multiple emotions at once, making space for them and observing them without letting them overtake us. It is through this process that we can slowly learn how to let go of that which no longer serves us and make room for the healing that will. Now, bring your attention to your body. Notice if you could be 5 or 10% more comfortable in this moment. Allow your body to relax further, gently letting go of any tension you may be feeling. Allow your face to soften and your jaw to relax. Feel your shoulders drop. Release the muscles in your arms and legs, allowing your body to melt into the chair or floor beneath you. Feel the support of the surface grounding you, providing you with a source of steady calm. Now bring your attention to your breath. Don't try to change it, just notice it. Notice the rhythm of your breath. Is it slow and relaxed? Does it feel shallow and quick? Allow your mind to quiet and your thoughts to fade into the distance as you focus on your breath. As you inhale and exhale, take a moment to notice the sensations in your body as you breathe. Feel the cool air as it enters your nose. Pay attention to the feeling of the breath as it enters your lungs, expanding your chest. Notice the sound of your breath as it leaves your body. Allow yourself to let go of any thoughts that might be taking up space in your mind and preventing you from being fully present in this meditation. With your next inhale, breathe in slowly and deeply through your nose. Allow your chest and abdomen to rise with the intake of this new breath. As you exhale, allow the breath to escape through your mouth with a gentle sigh. Feeling the release of pressure in your chest as the air exits your lungs. With your next inhale, imagine yourself breathing in a sense of calm and contentment. Let that sense of calm melt through your body as the air fills your lungs. As you exhale, imagine yourself breathing out any tension you may be feeling in your body. Allow that tension to fade away as the breath escapes into the room around you. Release any stress you may be holding on to with each out breath. It is natural if your mind wanders during this meditation. As you notice this has happened, gently bring your attention back to your breath without judgment. Focus on, once again, your breathing. Inhaling in a sense of calm and peace, and allowing any residual tension you may be holding on to leave your body as you exhale. Do this for your next 3 breaths. Give yourself permission to let go and become fully present in this current moment. Check in with your body. Notice any sensations you may be feeling. Try to locate a part of your body that feels good to you right now. One that feels at ease, pleasant, safe. If you are not able to locate a part of your body that feels good, Notice one that feels neutral and relaxed. Let your attention rest there. Notice any sensations you may feel. Notice if there are any changes in the sensations or if they remain constant. Feel whatever it is you may be feeling there. It is okay if your mind wanders away from this part of your body to other areas. If your focus drifts to other parts of your body, gently bring it back to the part that feels good or neutral. Let your mind relax as you lean into the comfortable and secure feeling that this part of your body creates for you. From time to time, you may notice other thoughts or emotions popping up, distancing you from being fully present in the moment. This is natural. Gently allow them to drift away as you bring your focus back to your body and this exercise. Now, if there's something difficult that's happening for you, whether it's an uncomfortable emotion or a physical sensation that's hard, let your attention go to that. Maybe it's an aching in your shoulder or back. Perhaps it's a headache or a sore joint. It could be a feeling of anger or sadness or anxiety. Whatever it is, tap into it, feel it, make sure to breathe. And now, return your attention to the area that feels at ease, the one that brings you a sense of calm and peace. Feel it. Feel your body and your mind relaxing, leaning into the pleasant feeling emanating from that part of your body. Allow this mindful redirection of your focus be a break from what could potentially be overwhelming to feel. Take 3 deep breaths as you focus on this part of your body that feels good. It is okay if your attention is momentarily distracted by another body part or sensation, by a thought or a sound in the room. When you notice this has happened, simply bring your focus back to the sensation you are focusing on. Do this with compassion for yourself and without judgment. Once again, return your attention to the part of your body that feels unpleasant, whether it's an ache or pain, or the difficult emotion and the sensations of that emotion. Maybe it's a clenching in your belly or a tightness in your jaw. Whatever it is, just notice it and breathe. Let it be there. Now bring your attention back to the pleasant or neutral part of your body once again, allowing yourself to relax further. Feel the sense of safety and the feeling of connection in that place. It is possible to feel connected to your body in the area that feels good, and yet know that there's something going on elsewhere that feels unpleasant. Just let it be there. Let the sensations exist together, just noticing them. Keeping maybe 80% of your attention on the part that feels peaceful and at ease. Your breath is steady and calm. Cast a sidelong glance at the difficult area once again. Notice what is happening to it. Is it shifting or changing into something else? Is it growing or shrinking? Become aware of whatever it is doing, knowing that you are safe and able to return to the pleasant part of your body if you need to. Just notice with curiosity and compassion. Keep breathing. As you inhale, once again, imagine a sense of calm entering your body through your nostrils and traveling deep inside you. As you exhale, imagine the feelings of tension releasing with your out breath. Notice that you are able to move your attention freely between them. You are not stuck on either one. Continue breathing as you bring your focus to the different sensations you are feeling. Understanding that opposing sensations can coexist in your body. You are not tied to one or another. You are able to choose where you direct your focus. You are able to bring your attention to the parts that feel good when the parts that are uncomfortable become too overwhelming to feel. You are able to approach the uncomfortable feelings from a place of safety and protection, knowing that you can return to the pleasant feelings if you need to. You are able to find balance within. Take a few more deep, slow breaths. As you do this, take your hand and place it gently over your heart. Allow the warmth of your hand to transfer into your chest. Feel that warmth traveling throughout your body, bringing with it a sense of calm and peace. Imagine a glow of warm light emanating from your hand and spreading its warmth throughout your body. Feel or see the light and warmth traveling from your chest down through your abdomen to the top of your thighs, into your knees, then shins, moving into your ankles and feet until it reaches the tips of your toes. Imagine the light and warmth traveling through your chest into your shoulders, then upper arms, the warmth melting through your elbows and forearms, into your wrists, and out the tips of your fingers. Pay attention as the warmth and light travels up into your shoulders and neck, slowly making its way up to your head. Feel it as the light spreads up to your chin, into your cheeks, and over your eyes. As it reaches the top of your head, feel the glow wash over your entire body. A powerful, warm, compassionate light originating from your hand, resting softly on your heart. Allow this warmth to envelop you in a light, loving, gentle embrace. Know that you are safe here. Offer yourself gratitude for taking the time and prioritizing yourself today. Know that you can return to this place at any time, whenever you may need to, simply by taking a few quiet moments to yourself, placing your hand over your heart, and paying attention with kindness to the ebb and flow of your emotions, and then sensations that accompany them in your body, the rhythm of your breath, and the calming of your mind. Slowly bring your attention back to your breath. Begin to listen to the sounds in the room around you. Wiggle your fingers and your toes as your awareness returns back to this space. When you are ready, you may open your eyes.
Thank you, Kirsten. I was thinking that is a wonderful exercise to do while you're lying in bed, putting yourself to sleep, because I was kind of yawning throughout that. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm on the screen and I'm yawning. And it wasn't that you were boring, but you've got such a beautiful voice.
Oh,
Thank you
you.
so much for that experience.
Thank you very much, Kirsten.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Well, this has been such an informative and I feel empowering session. So many people have written about what a great resource you've offered. And certainly everyone, once again, if you go to the alerts, which is on the top right-hand side of your page, you will find the links that will take you to the resources that Talent Pool have put together for your use, and also the resources that CMHA offer. So I hope that you do go there. It is also found on the Talent Pool website, so you'll be able to head there. A reminder that our next webinar is April 13th with Money Matters, and you don't need to register for it. If you've already registered for our series, you'll get an email. And so I do want to thank both of these wonderful women. Yesterday was International Women's Day, but today, thank you for all you do in support of community and the positive energy that you put out there. It really is making a difference in the world, so thank you. And I'd also like to thank the Alberta government, whom without their sponsorship, this would not be possible. And to Tribe, who's making it all happen on this brand new platform that we're using. And certainly also to the Talent Pool team who've made this actually happen. They do the registration, they organize everything. And so I feel like I've come away with a new perspective and some tips on how I might be able to handle some of the things that I'm thrown at during the day. And I hope that you all have also. So thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy your day and good positive thoughts for the rest of this week and the rest of this month, and turn off that negativity that we're seeing everywhere. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.